All right. All right. So we're back again for another episode. So if Goodwood is the jewel of the British summer, then Saratoga is America's. The spa. If you think big crowds, big money, definitely a lot of big money out there. And this week, we had the spa. And everyone came together in America. So Saratoga, for those of you not familiar, Saratoga is in upstate New York. I believe it's about 25, 30 minutes north of Albany. And so, yeah, this week we had future stars, a contender, a Travers contender announcing himself, and a trainer reminding everybody exactly why he's one of the greatest in American racing. So, thanks for joining us for another recap. And so here at Pulling the Race Card, we trying to get you as much info and vibes on the UK racing and US racing. I'm a huge fan of both. So, yeah, we're going to go through a little bit, recap. So, here are my biggest takeaways from Saratoga. The biggest winner, huge fan of the whole outfit, but it has to go to Renegade. Absolutely has to go to Renegade. What a horse. What a horse. Out of Inner Mischief as the sire, lot of talent in this horse. It's just a superstar of a horse over in the American circuit. The Jim Dandy isn't just another race. It's one of the biggest stepping stones to the Travers. And Renegade absolutely stamped himself as a serious contender. He sat miles off of the pace. He did let the race unfold. Was patient. Then absolutely flew home. And you could definitely see why Renegade is a very, very popular horse, very, very talented horse, and has the pedigree and the performances to prove it. And it's the kind of performance that gets people talking, you know. The Travers suddenly looks very interesting. The Travers looks very, very interesting. So yeah, huge shout out before I keep going. Huge shout out to Inside the Backstretch. If you're not familiar with Inside the Backstretch, get familiar with Inside the Backstretch. They are the ones. You can always get behind the scenes footage and interviews with just some of the people that really are the backbone of the whole industry, especially in the American market. Excuse me. So biggest story has to be Todd Pletcher. I mean, 5 winners on the card. A record 9th Jim Dandy. This is his 9th. And another reminder of why he's one of the most dominant trainers in American racing. That what can we say about Todd? Some trainers have good days. Todd Pletcher had one of those days that reminds everyone exactly why he's in the Hall of Fame conversation. And obviously with Mike Rapoli there feeding him some of the best horses, we will start to see the dominance continue in the future, and that's for sure. So yeah, let's go with the biggest upset. There were a couple, but I would say I have to go to Renegade. You know, there were a lot of doubters with Renegade, and him turning for home, like he still looked like he had far too much to do. Most horses flatten out from there. You know, most horses begin to start, you know, they have to press, they have to push. And a lot of horses don't have that, especially on these big races at these big meets. And Renegade did the opposite. He found another gear. And sometimes racing isn't about who gets the perfect trip. You know, it wasn't perfect. I doubt that was the plan going in. I'll have to kind of have a look back and some of the commentary before and after, but you know, it's about who finishes the strongest, regardless. And Renegade absolutely delivered, absolutely delivered. And then it goes without saying, you know, our ride of the week. Our ride of the week definitely has to go to the one and only Irad Ortiz Jr. What an athlete. What a jockey. What a horseman. Like, watch that replay again. Watch the replay again. You know, like a lot of jockeys would have panicked. You know, started asking the horse too early, not getting their timing right, not getting their rhythm right. You know, instead, Irad trusted him. Irad trusted him. He had a lot of faith in him. And he sat. He sat, chilly, nice and easy, waited, you know, and that's why I love Irad. Like, you go back to a lot of some of Irad's big races, he wasn't, you know, or some of the ones where you know, if he was leading out in front or if he was just off the pace. Look at some of the ones where where he really had to dig in and be patient, and you see a real race mindset. You see a real jockey mindset with Irad Ortiz, man. He is a legend. And when he needed to, he pushed the button. And Renegade absolutely exploded. That's confidence. That's experience. And that's why Irad keeps winning the biggest races in America. It is what it is. And so for Trainer of the Week, if that was our Jockey of the Week, we have Renegade as our, you know, our definite standout performance of the week, then the Trainer of the Week definitely has to go to Todd Pletcher. It has to go to Todd Pletcher. Look, Cox had another great meet, another great one, and some of the what we'll talk about next week has our guy B Cox in it, because he is the man as well. But it was about reminding everyone that when Saratoga rolls around, Todd Pletcher's horses are always ready. Big races, big performances, big expectations. Todd Pletcher delivers on the biggest stage every single time. Look, he doesn't win them all. But man, does he win the big ones when it counts? He does. So yeah, that's what elite stables do. And when you have an owner like Mike Rapoli that believes in you and is feeding you some of the best horses, it is what it is. My horse to follow, there was a few. I like Twinkletown. You know, as a 2-year-old, you know, they don't often win in the way that this filly did. She absolutely dominated the Saratoga Special. Absolutely dominated. And if she keeps progressing, we could be looking at one of the stars of the next year's 3-year-old crop. We could definitely be looking at one of the stars of the 3-year-old crop next year. And that's one to put in your notebook. So Twinkletown is my horse to look out for when looking at the Saratoga meet. And what a great meet. What an absolutely great meet that was. And I encourage those who are not familiar, if you're following and connected with us from the UK scene, definitely like, comment, and subscribe, because we will be covering a lot of American racing. A lot of American racing. Here's my hot take. Speaking of Saratoga being a great meet, American racing needs Saratoga more than ever now. You know, with what's going on in Florida, with the uncertainty, what's happening in California, Saratoga. Look, when Saratoga is buzzing, the entire sport feels alive. You know, you got packed grandstands. You have the biggest owners. You have the biggest trainers, the biggest jockeys. Everyone is here. And yes, we have the Kentucky Derby. Yes, we have great meets at the Del Mar with the Breeders' Cup. And yeah, we have the Pegasus. But there's some beautiful history with Saratoga that still remains to this day. Great tradition that goes on. And suddenly the horse racing starts feeling like major league sport again when horse racing is in Saratoga. The challenge now is finding a way to bottle that atmosphere, and spread it across the rest of the calendar. And look, American horse racing is definitely on the rise, regardless of, some of the big tracks starting to close down. We're finding new ways to be able to figure that thing out. If you look at what's happening, I will be covering what's happening in Maryland, because what's happening in Maryland is very, 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 very interesting. And I want to bring on some guests who really are clued up on the transition that's happening in Maryland, because around the world, I think globally, if you're globally, wherever you are in the world, if you're into horse racing, seeing what's happening in Maryland with the transition, it's history. We'll talk about the history of Maryland horse racing, and then we'll go into like where it's at now and the changes and the compromises that they had to make and are making with the government and with the governing bodies. It's really, really interesting with how they're now going to be transitioning. And some will say it's not enough to keep it sustaining. It's not enough with the compromises that they've had to make. But some would say it's a beautiful opportunity to maybe even funnel or to kind of like really hone in on like the real talent, which the industry is going to need going forward anyways. And they have some amazing jockeys coming up, some really talented jockeys from the circuit in Panama, from Puerto Rico, and they are absolutely smashing it in this area. And it has a great tradition. It has the Preakness. It has one of it has 1/3 of the Triple Crown, and it's in a small state, and it has a beautiful tradition, like I said, and amazing talent coming through. You mix that with now the new opportunity for new owners and new investors to get in and start to buy some decent horses and start to believe and invest in certain pedigrees, and maybe even some local pedigrees as well, which it's had in the past. Some amazing stallions coming through Maryland and the DMV and Delaware circuit. And so keep an eye out on when we are going to talk about what's happening in Maryland. I am from Maryland. I am British born, but I grew up in Maryland, and I drove past Laurel Park every single day of my life growing up, but wasn't really into horse racing. And now that I am fully invested in horse racing, I just have a huge passion and kind of desire to really dig in deep about what's happening locally in the area that I grew up in. And so be on the lookout for our talks on what's happening in Maryland horse racing, because what's happening in Maryland could potentially transition and transcend what's happening across America. And if some things work, maybe we might start seeing it spot up in different places globally in the industry. So a lot to go through in that. But look, this has been an amazing time with y'all. I am out of here. It's been great. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. This has been Pulling the Race Card with our weekend recap. And thank you much for watching. Peace.